Given 55 years of retrospect, the journey of Star Trek is truly a unique and bizarre one. A show that struggled through 3 seasons before being unceremoniously canceled, somehow going on to become a pop culture phenomenon. But perhaps even more bizarre is the journey Star Trek has taken through the world of comics. The first publisher of Star Trek comics was Dell Publishing's Gold Key Comics. As was common with this publisher, many of the creative teams were outsourced to foreign countries. In Star Trek's case, it was Italy. There was just one little problem. Star Trek was not airing in Italy at the time. This resulted in the creative team having to work almost entirely off of black and white production stills, which in turn led to the comics feeling a little off. For example, the USS Enterprise would routinely land in planetary atmospheres, was powered by titanium rather than dilithium, featured not only a periscope but also teleportation chambers instead of transporters. Phasers were called blaster rays. All of the crew had gold-colored shirts save for Spock, which means they were all members of Starfleet Command. Not to mention the official language of Starfleet was revealed to be Esperanto, which I guess means the movie Incubus was a prequel the whole time.
Siesta dolce.
As Gold Key Comics died off in the late 70s, the Star Trek license would move to Marvel shortly before the release of Star Trek the Motion Picture. However, the House of Ideas made a bit of an oopsie-doodle and only licensed characters and concepts from Star Trek the Motion Picture, and nothing before that. This resulted in Marvel Star Trek comics only exploring a few plots from the failed Star Trek Phase 2 series. Shortly before the release of Star Trek II, the one where Spock dies, the license transferred from Marvel to DC Comics, where it would remain for the better part of a decade, weaving in and out of the continuities of Star Trek III, where the Enterprise blows up, Star Trek IV, the one with the whales, Star Trek V, Shatner is God, and Star Trek VI, why is Christian Slater here? And it's at this point that the focus of today's episode, writer Peter David, enters the story. David is perhaps best known for his ultra-lengthy run in The Incredible Hulk, as well as 2 incarnations of X-Factor. Not to mention, we've covered some of David's work on this show before, with the likes of Aquaman Time and Tide, his run on Supergirl, and his independent work on the book Spy Boy. David came to Star Trek with a deep love of the original series. He saw the balance between the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy triumvirate as a reflection of the super ego, and id psychology dynamic. Because of this, David's work on the book felt very much how Star Trek used to feel in the TV days. Of course, it wasn't all wine and roses, as David got in hot water after insulting one of the license brokers. He has managed to continue working on Star Trek with his New Frontier series of novels, while also working on his own fantasy series, Sir Apropos of Nothing. Today, we're looking at the IDW reprints of the early work of Peter David on Star Trek. This is the Star Trek Archives Volume 1, The Best of Peter David. Dr. McCoy meets with Captain Kirk concerning Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott, a.k.a. Scotty. He's just returned from shore leave, and he's come back a little depressed. Okay, wait. I've seen this episode before. It's Jack the Ripper. The two visit Scotty in his quarters, nursing a few bottles of whiskey and holding a broken heart pendant as he explains that while on leave, Scotty was informed of his wife's death. Kirk and McCoy are taken aback, not knowing that Scotty actually had a wife. Scotty explains that he and his wife Glenn were married in between the end of his initial 5-year mission of the Enterprise and is returning to the new ship. Before that, he and Glenn had been childhood sweethearts, though they wouldn't be an official couple until their teen years at the behest of mutual friend Angus MacFarlane. Scotty and Glenn broke up when Scotty joined Starfleet, and Glenn just wanted to remain in Glasgow. She's too much of an Earthling and didn't want to be in space. Eventually, Glenn married Angus MacFarlane and moved to the planet Omicron Ceti 3 to work as an agricultural consultant. Suffice to say, this led to a bit of an awkward situation when Scotty made an official visit to Omicron Ceti 3 from the Enterprise. Not knowing that she was there, he planned a kiss on Glenn, and then Angus jumped him, thinking Scotty was putting the moves on his wife. Kind of because he was. Kirk witnessed the brawl between the two men and then Glenn breaking up. Afterwards, the captain then consoled Montgomery Scott. Then Jack the Ripper? Glenn and Angus's marriage fell apart as Angus was a known womanizer, and like I said before, she and Scotty reconnected when he was earthbound and thought his time in Starfleet was over. Eventually, though, he was called back to the stars, and Glenn stood by him through the death of Scotty's nephew, Peter Preston, in the events of Wrath of Khan. The death caused Monty to become isolated from the rest of his family, and Glenn was forced to play peacemaker most of the time. Later, Glenn told Scotty that she was headed home to Glasgow as he was preparing for the theft of the Enterprise during Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. It wasn't because of him, she was just too much of an Earth girl, and she'd always known that Scotty belonged mostly in the stars. Sadly, it appears Glenn never made it back to Glasgow as she was killed in a shuttle accident. It took a long time for the word to reach Scotty because the Enterprise was in exile on Vulcan, and then the events of Star Trek IV happened. This is where the continuity of the movies and the continuity of the comics can sometimes get a little confusing. Anyway, our next story features a collaboration between Peter David and young child star Billy Mooney, perhaps best known as the original Will Robinson in Lost in Space. The two must have bonded while doing this because Mooney would later play the character of Lanier on the show Babylon 5, where Peter David was a script consultant. The Enterprise is sent to the lifeless planet of Clinio 1 as it would be suitable for a Starfleet equipment test. There's just one problem. The planet isn't as lifeless as previously thought. An away team of Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Chekhov investigate and turn up a downed spaceship. Before they can investigate further, the team is attacked by a robot. Spock is wounded, taking a blast intended for McCoy, who then manages to destroy the robot when it goes after Kirk. The team moves onto the ship, revealing it to be of Karamian construction and hundreds of years old. Since Karamia is on the clear other end of the quadrant, they have no idea how it wound up on Clinia 1. Inside, they find 5 members of the crew in suspended animation pods. McCoy is unsure about reviving them, citing previous experience with cryogenically revived individuals. But he eventually relents to Kirk's orders and revives what appears to be the ship's commander. The individual introduces himself as Catalano, leader of the Worthy. The Enterprise crew is stunned as the Worthy are thought only to be a myth. The Worthy are ancient travelers from the planet Karamia, a highly advanced civilization that sought to spread that advancement throughout the galaxy. To that end, they assembled their finest philosophers, engineers, scientists, and athletes. The Worthy would travel from planet to planet, healing plagues, ending wars, and making general observations of places they visited. That is, until they encountered the Greek god Apollo, who the Enterprise bumped into in the episode Who Mourns for Adonis. Upon angering the deity, Apollo threw the Worthy all the way to the planet Clinia 1, where they were stranded. Coincidentally, the episode Who Mourns for Adonis also popped up in the previous issue, as that took place just before the events where Scotty had his initial reunion with Glenn on the planet where he got into the fight with Angus. The Enterprise crew is ecstatic at the possibility of meeting the Worthy. Scotty for the technological knowledge, Chekhov to meet the crew's telepath, and Naj, whom he identified with in his initial research. Even Kirk is excited by the possibilities. Who isn't excited about any of this is Starfleet, who really wants to test the equipment. Kirk is given orders to get the Worthy off the planet and then do the test. The other members of the Worthy are revived, including Eileen, the second command, Gim, the ship's engineer, Inaj, the previously mentioned telepath, and Eret, Clenato's son. Eret is a boy genius who demands the return of his robot, only to be upset when Dr. McCoy reveals that it was destroyed. Yes, it turns out that robot was a treasured companion of that boy genius and his family as they were adrift in the cosmos. You ever realize this has the exact same plot as that Gary Oldman, Matt LeBlanc movie? Captain Kirk then takes Catalano aside and explains the situation. Starfleet wishes to test a device called the Lambert Unit. Using the device might result in the destruction of Clinia 1. Catalano says that's just not going to be an option, as several members of the Worthy who died on Clinia, including Catalano's wife and eldest son, are buried there. It's a memorial. The Enterprise crew agrees, though it appears that Starfleet has other plans and has dispatched Captain Doogie Howser's dad of the Exeter to retrieve the Lambert Unit. The Lambert Unit is Starfleet's attempt at faster-than-warp travel, or slipstream technology. Basically, this is how the Borg can seemingly pop up at will. It's how they travel throughout the galaxy. It's also the technology that Voyager used to return home in the finale of its series. Now, this other captain, or Captain Styles I should say, was on the USS Excelsior, which Scotty sabotaged and allowed the Enterprise to escape during the events of Star Trek III. He's now on the USS Exeter. Back on the Enterprise, the Worthy are informed of the current situation on Karamia, and it's quite bad. The planet has been in a state of civil war for generations. However, both sides adhere to a prophecy that the Worthy will return and bring peace. As the Enterprise makes its way towards Karamia, the Worthy bond with the crew. Scotty and Gim work on fixing up a shuttlecraft for the Worthy to take back, while Chekhov bonds with Inaj on a deep level. Yeah, this is definitely a sticky situation, as Inaj is married to Gim, and of course Chekhov's girlfriend was part of that group of space hippies from the episode The Way to Eden. Chekhov realizes that this is a mistake and cuts things off with Inaj, who taunts him as she exits. Meanwhile, Eret reassembles the robot and makes peace with Dr. McCoy. However, the ship is soon put on red alert as it enters Karamian space. A ship fires upon the Enterprise, and it's not from Karamia, it's actually the Gorn who want the Lambert Unit. The Gorn are a race of humanoid reptiles who first encountered the Enterprise in the classic episode Arena, where it turned out that Starfleet had set up a colony on a Gorn nesting planet. Catalano steps up and references a part of Gorn history that only the member of the Worthy could possibly know. It's enough for the Gorn to fall back and allow passage to Karamia. Unfortunately, Anaj begins detecting no signs of life on the planet, and the Enterprise scanners confirm it. The Enterprise and the Worthy may have arrived too late. The worthy, save for Anaj, are in total denial, but a shuttlecraft exploration of Karamia confirms it. The planet is completely dead. All that remains is a monument to the worthy. The worthy resign themselves to the truth and slink back to the Enterprise for a memorial service. At the service, Eileen calls out Catalano for his ineptitude in stranding them on that planet for all those years. In fact, all the worthy have come down in grief. Gim has accessed Scotty's cache of Romulan ale, and Anaj attempts once more to hook up with Chekhov. This winds up culminating in a confrontation with Gim, leading to Chekhov getting knocked unconscious, and Anaj and Gim just start boinking in the middle of the hallway.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Captain Kirk receives a call from the Exeter and Captain Sergeant Howard Hunter from Hill Street Blues. They've arrived for the Lambert Unit to presumably use it on Clinia 1. This manages to unite the worthy once more as they feel again that the planet should be a memorial to their fallen comrades. It's then that Catalano steps up and asks why exactly it was that Karamia was allowed to be destroyed. Why didn't the Federation intervene? Spock and the captains explain the Prime Directive forbids Federation interference in internal matters. Still, a message is sent to Starfleet about Clinia 1 as the worthy begin conferring with each other. However, it turns out that this was all a bit of a ruse. Clinia 1 has already been designated as a memorial. Also, the Lambert Unit is being recalled due to a flaw that would destroy the galaxy, and that's where the Federation keeps all its stuff. In reality, this was to get the worthy to realize that even though their planet is gone, their initial mission to bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy isn't. The worthy could technically do whatever they want because they're not part of Starfleet, so the Prime Directive doesn't apply to them. So the worthy decide that it's time to leave the Enterprise and say their goodbyes as they prepare to once more bring peace and prosperity throughout the galaxy.
We have one final entry in today's episode, and it's a story considering how the Enterprise handles the death of one of its lesser crew members. And yeah, I know that there's a colloquialism for these people, but you have to remember this is movies 2 through 6 continuity. They all have that colored shirt.
Captain Kirk prepares to deliver a eulogy for young Ensign Thomas Lee. There's just one problem. Kirk knows absolutely nothing about Lee. He just keeps giving the same generic spiel about being loyal, dedicated, and brave, etc. It just doesn't feel right, especially given how Lee died. At Bones' suggestion, Kirk tries to learn more about Ensign Lee and talks to Chekhov, Lee's superior officer on the security team. This was Lee's first assignment to the Enterprise and his first away mission. He was really excited. Perhaps a little too excited, as during the briefing, which concerned pirates' attacks on a space colony, Lee asked a question about the degree of weaponry that needed to be involved. Even though this was a routine question, it was considered to be a little uncouth, and Chekhov took Lee to task, something that he now regrets. Lee's fellow security detail aren't much help either. They just didn't get the chance to really know him. All they can say is that what happened on the mission was that the pirates attempted to get the jump on Kirk, and Lee wound up taking a phaser blast intended for the captain. Still, Kirk is enough for a eulogy and reminds everyone that the Enterprise doesn't make them special. They make the Enterprise special. No matter what the rank or experience, one death affects all of the ship.
And that concludes our look at the Star Trek Archives Volume 1, The Best of Peter David. Now I should point out that if you want to look up further Star Trek Archives collections, they don't all follow Peter David. I think the second one is the Borg, and maybe there's the Gorn that pop up at another point, so yeah, it gets a little confusing. So just warning you in advance there. However, for this collection, well, there are some really good ideas here. I think the characterization of the Enterprise crew is down pat. They feel like the Star Trek Enterprise crew, like those actors playing those people, like the actors speaking the dialogue. The art all looks good. They've managed to get the actors' likenesses pretty down pat, which in licensed comics can be a really tricky thing sometimes. So yes, I think that all works. That being said, I do have a couple of qualms here. First and foremost, this feels a little padded sometimes. Like the scenes with the worthy is a lot of Clonado and Eileen regaling the Enterprise crew with the tales of their exploits, and Errett playing chess with Spock and wanting to build the robot again, and Gim fixing things, and Anaj hitting on Chekhov, and it gets a little repetitive sometimes. It really feels padded out. So yeah. And another thing with the padding a bit, the way this is sort of layered is kind of weird. Like, we begin with a story about death, and then we end with a story about death. It's kind of a little off-putting sometimes. It kind of breaks up the brevity in this. It just, kind of mutes a lot of the fun. Like, that's the best way I can describe it. It's not bad, it just kind of makes me feel a little off-put, if that makes any sense. Also, this is pretty continuity laden, so I don't know if you were unfamiliar with Star Trek, if I could necessarily recommend this to you. Like, you would probably be better off watching, an episode of the TV series or the movies at that point, not really jumping into the comics. So, yeah, like I said, this is not bad. It's actually very enjoyable. It's a good read, especially for any Star Trek fan. But if you're not a Star Trek fan, I can't fully recommend it to you. So that's why I'm giving the Star Trek Archives, The Best of Peter David, a B. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. There, you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.